There is a man lying on the ground in the dark, and his pillow is a rock. He is not camping. He is not resting. He is running for his life. And he has been running long enough that his legs have given out and his eyes have closed. And somewhere on a hillside between Beersheba and Haran, with nothing above him but cold air and stars, Jacob falls asleep. He does not deserve what happens next. That is the first thing you need to understand about God-sent dreams in the Bible. They do not come to the deserving. They do not arrive on the pillow of a righteous man in a clean house with his family around him. They come to fugitives. They come to prisoners. They come to pagan kings who have never said God's name. They come again and again to the person who has run out of options, and they arrive at the exact moment when that person cannot run anymore. The Bible records more than 17 dreams sent directly by God. They span 2,000 years of human history, from a wandering shepherd on a hillside in Canaan to a Roman official's wife inside the walls of Jerusalem on the most important Friday in human history.
Every single one of them changes something. And here's what most people miss. Not one of them was requested. Not one of the 17 dreamers asked God to speak to them in their sleep. God simply appeared, in the dark, uninvited, with something urgent to say. The Hebrew word for dream is shalom. Write that down, shalom. It comes from a root that means to be healthy, to be restored. The ancient rabbis believed that a dream was not an escape from reality. It was the moment your mind finally stopped arguing long enough to hear what was already true. An unexamined dream, the Talmud says, is like an unopened letter. God has been writing letters in the dark for a very long time. Jacob does not know any of this. He is 20 years old, roughly, and he has just stolen his brother's blessing through deception. And his mother has told him to run before Esau kills him. So he runs. He runs north. He runs until his legs stop working. He finds a flat stone on a hillside and puts his head down and closes his eyes.
And then the ground opens up. Not literally, but that is what it feels like in the text. The sudden, violent arrival of something enormous into the small life of a frightened young man. He sees a staircase, some translations say a ladder, stretching from the earth where he is lying all the way up into what the Hebrew calls shamayim, the heavens. And on this staircase, going up and coming down, there are messengers. Angels, we say in English, but the Hebrew is malakim, which just means ones who are sent. Sent ones, moving between the world Jacob can see and the world he cannot. And then God speaks. Not a whisper, not a symbol to be interpreted later. God speaks directly, clearly, at the top of this staircase in a dream on a hillside, to a man who does not deserve a single word. I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you are lying I will give to you, and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go.
Jacob wakes up, and he is afraid. Not grateful, not peaceful, afraid. The text says he was afraid, and he said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." He takes the rock that was his pillow, and he stands it up as a pillar and pours oil on it and names the place Bethel, which means simply house of God. A man falls asleep with a rock under his head. He wakes up standing in the doorway of heaven. That is how God-sent dreams begin. But Jacob was not the first. There is a dream in Genesis 20 that almost nobody talks about, and it may be the most surprising dream in the entire Old Testament, because the dreamer is not one of the patriarchs. He is not a prophet or a priest
or anyone you learned about in Sunday school. His name is Abimelech. He is a Canaanite king, a pagan. He worships gods who are not God. And one night, after Abraham lied about Sarah, told the king she was his sister, not his wife, God appears to Abimelech in a dream and says something that should stop you cold.
You are a dead man. Not a symbol, not a staircase. 4 words in the dark to a pagan king who had done nothing wrong, who had taken Sarah into his house in good faith, who did not know she was married. And God appears to him in a dream to warn him, to protect him, to tell him this woman belongs to another man, and if you do not return her, you will die. Abimelech wakes up and he is terrified. He returns Sarah. He confronts Abraham. He gives them livestock and silver. And the crisis is averted. Stay with me, because that detail matters more than it might seem. God sends a dream to a pagan king. God speaks directly to someone outside the covenant, not to condemn him, not to destroy him, to warn him, to protect him, to keep a promise God made to Abraham from unraveling because of Abraham's own cowardice. The first lesson of God-sent dreams is this: God is not limited to speaking to the people who already know his name. He speaks to whoever he needs to speak to, in whatever darkness he needs to enter, even yours. There is a teenager in Canaan who has a dream, and he makes the worst possible decision a person can make after receiving a vision from God. He tells his family about it. His name is Joseph. He is 17 years old. He is his father's favorite son, which his 10 older brothers have noticed, resented, and are now quietly seething about. His father has given him a coat, not just any coat, the kind of coat that signals status, that says this one is different, this one is chosen. And Joseph, who is 17 and has not yet learned that wisdom sometimes means silence, opens his mouth. "Listen to this dream I had," he says. His brothers are already watching him with flat eyes. "We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field, and suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." The room goes quiet. His brothers say, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And the text tells us, with quiet understatement, that they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said.
But it gets stranger. Joseph has a second dream, and instead of learning from the first, he tells this one too, this time in front of his father as well. In this dream, the sun and the moon and 11 stars bow down to him. His father rebukes him publicly. His brothers are furious, and the text says, notice this detail: his father kept the matter in mind. Jacob had seen a staircase reaching into heaven. He knew what God-sent dreams looked like, and something about what his son was saying made him file it away and say nothing else. Here is what you need to see about Joseph's dreams. They are not requests. They are not promises of comfort. They are announcements of a future that will require Joseph to be broken before it can be built. Within weeks of telling his brothers about his dreams, Joseph will be thrown into a pit, sold to slave traders, taken to Egypt in chains, falsely accused, imprisoned, forgotten. For 13 years. 13 years between the dream and its fulfillment. 13 years in which every single circumstance of Joseph's life seems to be moving in the exact opposite direction of what God showed him. And at no point in those 13 years does the text record Joseph losing faith in what he saw. He does not stop believing the dream. He cannot stop believing it because the dream did not come from him.
Pay attention to this, because this is the pattern that runs through every God-sent dream in the Bible. The dream is always bigger than the dreamer's current circumstances. Always. Jacob is a fugitive. The dream shows him the gate of heaven. Joseph is a slave. The dream shows him 11 stars bowing. The distance between where these people are standing and what they are being shown is never small. It is vast. It is almost cruel in its vastness. God does not show you where you are. He shows you where you are going. And the gap between the two is where the story happens. Joseph arrives in Egypt and is sold to a man named Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials. He works. He rises. He is put in charge of everything in Potiphar's house. And then Potiphar's wife lies about him, and he is thrown into prison. He is in the dungeon now, farther from the dream than ever, when two men arrive, Pharaoh's cupbearer and Pharaoh's baker. Both of them have dreams on the same night. Both of them wake up troubled. Joseph notices. He walks over to them and asks the question that will eventually change the history of the ancient world. Why do you look so sad today?
They say they've had dreams, and there's no one to interpret them. Joseph says, and the Hebrew here is worth sitting with, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." Not, "I am a dream interpreter." Not, "I have a gift." Do not interpretations belong to God? Joseph has been in prison. He has been abandoned by his brothers, falsely accused, and forgotten by the cupbearer he is about to help. And his first instinct is still to point away from himself and toward the God who gave him a dream in a field in Canaan a decade ago. The cupbearer describes 3 vines producing grapes, and Joseph pressing them into Pharaoh's cup. "Good news," Joseph says. "In 3 days you will be restored to your position." The baker, encouraged, describes 3 baskets of bread on his head and birds eating from the top basket. Joseph's face must have changed. "In 3 days," he says, "Pharaoh will have you hanged." Both come true within 72 hours. But here's the part nobody tells you. The cupbearer is restored. He walks out of that prison and back into Pharaoh's palace, and he forgets Joseph. The text does not soften this. The chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. 2 full years pass, 730 days. Joseph sits in that prison, and the cupbearer does not say a word.
Until the morning, Pharaoh wakes up from a dream he cannot shake. 2 dreams, actually. In the first, 7 fat and sleek cows come up out of the Nile. And then 7 gaunt and ugly cows come up after them and eat the fat ones. In the second, 7 full and healthy heads of grain are swallowed by 7 thin and scorched heads of grain. Pharaoh calls every magician and wise man in Egypt. None of them can interpret the dreams. And only then, only in this moment of total institutional failure, does the cupbearer remember. "I had a dream," he says, "and a Hebrew slave in the prison interpreted it correctly." Joseph is summoned, cleaned up, given new clothes, brought before the most powerful man in the ancient world. And he says again the same thing he said in the dungeon. "I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." 13 years of suffering, 2 dreams he could not have manufactured, 1 moment in front of 1 man. The 2 dreams are one, Joseph says. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of abundance, 7 years of famine. Store grain during the plenty. Do it now.
The Jewish historian Josephus, writing in the 1st century, described what happened next as one of the most remarkable acts of political discernment in Egyptian history. Pharaoh takes his signet ring off his own finger and places it on the finger of a 30-year-old Hebrew slave and says, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace." The officials who failed to interpret the dreams stood in silence, while the man who had been forgotten in a dungeon walked out wearing the ring of the most powerful ruler on earth. And this is where it gets remarkable. Joseph does not say, "Finally." He does not carry bitterness toward the brothers who sold him, the wife who lied about him, the cupbearer who forgot him. He goes to work. He travels the length of Egypt. He builds granaries. He stores grain until the text says the amount was like the sand of the sea, so much they stopped counting. The famine comes, exactly as God showed in the dream. Not just to Egypt, to the entire ancient Near East, to Canaan,
where an old man named Jacob sits with his sons and watches their food run out, where 10 brothers eventually look at each other and say, "We have to go to Egypt."
They do not know their brother is there. They bow before him, faces to the ground. And Joseph looks down at them and remembers a dream he had in a field when he was 17 years old. Sheaves bowing. He had to wait 22 years. But he did not manufacture it. He did not force it. He simply stayed faithful inside circumstances that made no sense. And God built the rest. The rabbis have a word for this kind of faithfulness in the gap between the dream and its fulfillment. They call it bitachon. Trust that is not passive, not sitting still and hoping, but active, working, serving, interpreting other people's dreams in a dungeon, even when no one is interpreting yours. Now we need to talk about a dream that goes in the opposite direction. We need to talk about Nebuchadnezzar. He is the most powerful man alive. In the 6th century before Christ, the king of Babylon sits at the center of the largest empire the ancient world had yet produced. His city has walls so thick that chariot races are held on top of them. His army has already destroyed Jerusalem, burned Solomon's temple to the ground, and marched the entire Jewish population into exile. He does not believe in the God of Israel. And then he has a dream. He wakes up and he cannot shake it, but he cannot fully remember it either. He calls his magicians and astrologers and wise men and demands they tell him both the dream and its interpretation. They tell him this is impossible. No king has ever demanded such a thing. No man can know another man's dream. Nebuchadnezzar tells them he will have them all cut into pieces if they fail. Daniel hears about this. Daniel, a young Jewish exile, probably in his early 20s, one of the boys taken from Jerusalem when Nebuchadnezzar destroyed it, asks the king for time. He goes home. He tells his 3 friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, the men the Babylonians renamed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they pray. That night, God gives Daniel the dream in a vision of his own. Daniel goes back to Nebuchadnezzar and says with the same calm that Joseph had in Pharaoh's court 1,000 years earlier, "No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he is asked about, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries."
There is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. Daniel describes the dream, a colossal statue, head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, feet of iron and clay. And then a stone, cut not by human hands, strikes the statue at its feet. The whole thing collapses. The stone becomes a mountain that fills the whole earth. Nebuchadnezzar is the head of gold, Daniel tells him. But after him will come another kingdom, and after that, another, and after that, another. And then the stone, a kingdom that will never be destroyed, a kingdom not built by human hands. Now watch what happens next. Nebuchadnezzar falls face down before Daniel. A man who burned Jerusalem falls on his face before a Jewish teenager and says, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries." Most scholars believe Daniel's 4 kingdoms are Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome, which means the stone, the kingdom that fills the earth, arrives right on schedule, in the 1st century, in a small Roman province called Judea, in a man the Roman authorities will eventually execute as a political threat.
The dream Nebuchadnezzar had in Babylon still hasn't finished coming true. Here's what most people miss when they read Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar did not ask for this dream. He was a destroyer of sacred things, a man of enormous ego and violent impulse, and God showed up in his sleep anyway. Not to flatter him, not to comfort him, to tell him the truth about where history is going. God sends dreams to the powerful, not to affirm their power, but to remind them it has an expiration date.
And then there is a dream that goes the other direction entirely. Not to the most powerful man in the world, to one of the most overlooked. There is a moment in Judges 7 that most people skip past. Gideon has been told by God to attack the Midianite army, an army described as countless as locusts, covering the valley floor like sand on the seashore. Gideon has already been asked to reduce his own army from 32,000 men to 300. 300 men against a force that cannot be counted. He is terrified. God knows this. God says to Gideon, and the tenderness here is worth pausing on, if you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah and listen to what they are saying. Afterward, you will be encouraged.
Gideon goes. He sneaks to the edge of the Midianite camp in the dark, and he overhears two soldiers talking. One of them has had a dream. A loaf of barley bread, the food of the poor, the food of peasants, comes tumbling into the Midianite camp and strikes a tent so hard that the tent collapses and falls flat. The other soldier interprets it without hesitation. This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands. Gideon is standing in the dark outside an enemy camp, listening to an enemy soldier interpret an enemy soldier's dream. And the interpretation is that Gideon is going to win. He bows his head and worships right there, in the dark, outside the camp of his enemies. And then he goes back and wakes his 300 men. God sent a dream to a Midianite soldier, a man who did not worship him, did not know him, did not serve him, in order to encourage a terrified Israelite standing in the shadows 30 yards away. There is no category for this in our theology. God is not supposed to work this way. But this is what the text says happened.
And it raises a question you may not have considered before. How many times has God sent a dream to someone near you for your benefit that you will never hear about? There is only one dream in the entire Bible where God asks a question instead of giving one. It happens in Gibeon, on the night after Solomon has offered 1,000 burnt offerings on the great high place there. Solomon is young, newly crowned, inheriting the kingdom his father David built with blood and prayer and decades of war. He is standing in the middle of an empire he did not earn. And that night, God appears to him in a dream, not with a ladder, not with a statue, not with 7 cows, with a question. Ask for whatever you want me to give you. Think about what you would say. The entire inventory of human desire is available in this moment. Long life, wealth, the death of your enemies, power, pleasure. Every person who has ever heard this story has played the game. What would I ask for? Solomon asks for a discerning heart. The Hebrew is lev shomeah, a listening heart. Not wisdom in the abstract, not intelligence or cleverness. A heart that can hear. A heart that can tell the difference between what is being said and what is true.
God's response is immediate. Since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth or the death of your enemies, I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. And I will also give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor. And then this, which most people miss, and if you walk in obedience to me, I will give you a long life. The long life is conditional. The wisdom is not. God gives the wisdom unconditionally, freely, instantly, in a dream on a night after 1,000 offerings. Solomon wakes up, returns to Jerusalem, stands before the Ark of the Covenant, offers sacrifices, holds a feast, and then, immediately, within verses, a case comes before him. 2 women, 1 baby, both claiming to be the mother. Solomon, with the listening heart still warm in his chest, asks for a sword. Cut the baby in half. The real mother cries out, "Give the baby to her,
Don't kill him. Solomon points to her. Give her the child. All Israel heard the verdict, the text says, and they held the king in awe because they saw that God had given him wisdom to administer justice.
The dream produced a decision. The decision produced awe. The awe produced trust. And trust in a kingdom is everything. If this kind of content matters to you, if you find yourself wanting to go deeper on these moments where one night changes the entire direction of a life, consider subscribing so you don't miss what's coming next. We are only halfway through the story, and the most extraordinary dream in this entire list is still ahead. There is a man in first century Nazareth, and he has just received the worst news of his life. His name is Joseph, not the Joseph of Egypt, a different Joseph, a carpenter, a quiet man, a man who has been promised in marriage to a young woman named Mary, and who has now discovered that she is pregnant, and he knows with absolute certainty that the child is not his. The law is clear on what to do. He could expose her publicly. He could pursue the full legal consequence. Instead, and Matthew records this detail as if it tells you everything you need to know about this man, he decides to divorce her quietly, to protect her from what the law would do if it had the chance. He has made his decision. He is at peace with it. He closes his eyes. And an angel of the Lord appears to him in a dream.
Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. Joseph wakes up. He does not argue. He does not ask for a sign. He does not say, "Let me pray about it," or "Let me think it through." The text simply says, when Joseph woke up, he did what the angel of the Lord had commanded him. He goes to Mary's house in the morning. Every word Joseph speaks in the Gospel of Matthew, 0. He never says a single word in the entire New Testament. He receives 3 more dreams: flee to Egypt, return from Egypt, settle in Galilee. And every single time, the structure of the text is the same. The dream comes. Joseph wakes up. He does what he was told. No commentary, no questions, no conditions. Joseph of Nazareth is the most obedient dreamer in the Bible, and he never says a word. There is something the church has not fully reckoned with about this man. He raised the Son of God on a carpenter's wage, in an occupied country, guided entirely by dreams he could not verify or prove to anyone around him. His neighbors thought his wife had been unfaithful. They thought the child's father was unknown. Joseph knew the truth because an angel told him in a dream, and he kept that truth and walked in it quietly for 30 years. Some callings do not come with applause. Some callings come at night, in a dream, with instructions that make no sense to the people watching. Joseph got up anyway.
There is one more dream. It does not come to a patriarch or a prophet or a king. It does not come to anyone who appears in a genealogy or a creed or a stained glass window. It comes to a woman whose name the Gospel of Matthew does not record. We know her only as Pilate's wife. We mentioned her at the beginning. Now we come back. It is early Friday morning in Jerusalem. The city is full. Passover has drawn pilgrims from across the Roman world, hundreds of thousands of people crowding into a city built for far fewer. The air smells like dust and animals and cooking fires. And inside the praetorium, the Roman governor of Judea is about to preside over a trial he does not want to conduct.
Jesus of Nazareth has been handed to him by the religious authorities. Pilate questions him. He finds no basis for a charge. He tries to release him. The crowd pushes back. And then, in the middle of the trial, a message arrives. His wife sends word. Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered greatly in a dream today because of him. That is the entire record. One sentence. Suffered greatly in a dream today.
We do not know what she saw. The text does not tell us, but the Greek word Matthew uses for what she experienced, epithon, is the same root as the word for suffering, for passion, for being acted upon by something outside yourself. She was not disturbed by a vague unease. She was struck by something that reached into her sleep and shook her. She wakes up. Her husband is already in the middle of the trial. She finds a messenger and sends the word, "Do not do this." Pilate reads the message. He looks at the crowd. He looks at the man standing before him. He calls for water. He washes his hands and says, "I am innocent of this man's blood. It is your responsibility." He hands Jesus over to be crucified. Origen, the 3rd century theologian, wrote that her dream was a divine warning, sent specifically to give Pilate one final opportunity to choose differently. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church canonized her as a saint. Her name, in their tradition, is Procla. She has a feast day. The rest of the world forgot her, but God did not. There is a Greek word, apocalypsis. We translate it as apocalypse and use it to mean catastrophe. But the word itself means only one thing, unveiling, the pulling back of a curtain, the revealing of what was already true.
Every God-sent dream in the Bible is an apocalypsis, an unveiling. Jacob's dream unveiled the gate of heaven on a hillside he thought was just a stopping point. Joseph's dream unveiled a future that would take 22 years to arrive. Pharaoh's dream unveiled a famine that hadn't started yet. Solomon's dream unveiled the shape of wisdom before he had ever used it. Nebuchadnezzar's dream unveiled the arc of world history, from Babylon to a kingdom not made with human hands. And Procla's dream unveiled the truth about the man standing trial in her husband's court. She was right. She was the only person in that building on that morning who tried to stop what was happening. A Roman woman, a Gentile, a person whose name the Gospels do not record. God spoke to her in a dream, and she acted immediately. And she was ignored. And this is where it gets remarkable, not just for her, but for you. 17 dreams, 2,000 years of history, and the pattern is always the same. God sends the dream to whoever he needs to send it to. A fugitive on a hillside, a teenager in Canaan, a pagan king in Babylon, a carpenter in Nazareth, a Roman woman in Jerusalem. He does not wait for the right credentials or the right religion or the right moment in the service. He shows up in the dark, uninvited, with something true to say.
And the people who act on what they receive? Jacob, Joseph, Solomon, Joseph of Nazareth. They become the hinge points of the story. Not because they were extraordinary people, but because they were willing to trust what they saw in the dark. So here are the 3 things to take with you. First, God sends dreams to the people nobody expects. Pagans, prisoners, a teenage boy who talks too much, a woman who never gets named. If you have ever thought you were too far outside, too far gone, too far from the right category to receive something from God, the record says otherwise. He speaks to whoever he needs to speak to, even you. Second, every God-sent dream in the Bible required action. Nobody who obeyed stayed the same. Jacob stood up and built a pillar. Joseph interpreted dreams in a dungeon. Solomon went back to Jerusalem and picked up a sword. Joseph of Nazareth went to Mary's house in the morning.
The dream was never the destination. It was the beginning of a road. Third, the most powerful dream in this entire list may be the one we almost passed over entirely. Not Jacob's ladder, not Pharaoh's cows, not Nebuchadnezzar's statue. A woman wakes up. She has been shaken by something she cannot explain. Her husband is about to make the worst decision in human history, and she knows it, because God told her in a dream.
The Talmud says, an unexamined dream is like an unopened letter. God has been writing letters in the dark for a very long time. The question is whether you will open yours. If this video helped you see the Bible differently, if something clicked, consider subscribing and leaving a comment below about which dream hit you hardest. We read every one. And if you want to go deeper on the people in these stories, Joseph, Daniel, the silent carpenter from Nazareth, those videos are waiting for you right here. God is still speaking. Some of it happens in the daylight, and some of it, the most urgent, the most honest, the most carefully aimed, happens while you are asleep.